So, welcome back. In this part of our demonstration video, we will be putting together the assignment part of the drawings that are needed for this week's work. I want to start by saying that this is a sketch-only assignment. What that means is that you don't have to completely finish the drawing with all the line weights and all that other stuff. This is really intended as a introductory drawing, so you begin to understand the concepts that we discussed in our previous video section. This has to do with projection lines and picking up the general dynamics of where the lines go and how they get placed on a drawing. So with that, let's start. I would suggest that you print out or have available the exercise or the example that I've put together. Here you can see there are kind of milestones in this drawing that we can look at together and use as a reference. So in case what you see here is not exactly clear, you can follow along with the example. With that being said, I think we'll need some tools. The scale that we'll be using this time will be a full measure scale. So this will be the one marked in inches from 0 to 12. And so we're not going to be working with a 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch scale. Regular triangle, pencil, and eraser, and we're ready to go. So based on that, let's go ahead and get our sheet taped down. We're going to be working on 11 by 17, which is our standard size sheet. So let's go ahead and get it taped down and get it ready for drawing. So as we've done in the past, we want to make sure that the drawing is square to the parallel and or to the T-square that you'll be drawing with, so that the information will be consistent and won't move too much on you during the rest of the drawing exercise. Okay, almost there. All right. So with that, I have some notes that kind of lead me through this process of building this perspective, 2-point perspective drawing. And one of the things I wanted to point out is that our camera angle over here has changed just a bit, and that we will be using some example illustrations or some of the models that we used in our previous assignment demonstration, and that will help us to kind of test what we're doing on this drawing. So to set the drawing up, what we want to do is we're taped down. We want to start with a horizontal line that runs all the way across the sheet. And this is going to be our horizon line. So we're going to set that at 4 inches from the bottom of the sheet. So measure and mark that, and just extend the line from one end of the drawing sheet to the other. Now that you've done that, we're going to come in 1/2 inch from each end so that we can set a vanishing point. So at this point, our drawing really should represent I'm going to make it an adjustment. That length on that, not a 1/2 inch, but a 1/4 inch, I apologize. So please just make your line segment between the two vanishing points 16.5 inches long. So just a 1/4 inch in from each end of the drawing will get us our vanishing points. So once you've marked that 1/4 inch, it's appropriate to identify that we have a left vanishing point and a right vanishing point. So to do that, just on the left side, go ahead and make the mark and dot just a little bit larger and write LVP on the left side. And on the right side, do the same thing and write RVP for right vanishing point, and on the left we have a left vanishing point. So now we have a horizon line and 2 vanishing points, so that's good to establish before we start the drawing itself. Now, as we begin to create the form of the drawing, what I want you to know is that there's going to be a lot of visual distortion that happens on this drawing. It's very different than a multi-view drawing, which had all the elements of scale, proportion, and sizing that could be tested. This drawing will be very visual oriented, and so what that means is that just as the human eye picks up distortion and we take it and we process it and dismiss the distortion as being natural and normal to our viewpoint, then the same thing's going to happen on this drawing here. So I just want to make that as a pre-statement. So as we develop it, you're going to see some things that look very different than the multi-view drawings that we've done in the past. So with that in mind, what we want to do is we want to create a vertical line 6 inches in from the left side of the vanishing point. So marking over, coming over and marking 6 inches. That puts us close to the middle, but still more on the left side. Give yourself a vertical line, and that line needs to extend 3 inches below the horizon line and 3 inches above the horizon line. So as we do that, we want to go ahead and measure where those points are. And go ahead and make sure that they are listed there. So we are 3 inches above and 3 inches below. Okay, so that's one of our primary leading edges of this drawing. So we've just identified the first vertical line. Remember in our rules, all verticals stay vertical. So next is we want to extend a vertical line 3 inches from the left side of the drawing. So I'm measuring from that first vertical line, we want to go left 3 inches. Mark it and provide another vertical line. Now we're not going to measure this one because the projected lines will create the height at both points. So on the other side of this primary vertical edge, or the leading vertical edge of this form, we're going to extend over 5 inches to the towards the right vanishing point. So measure and mark that. Again, we don't know the height, but based on the projection lines that are produced from the leading edge, we will soon find out how the projections will create the lengths or the heights of both those lines. So with that, what we want to do is we want to extend the center vertical line, that 5 inches up. Well, let me go back. Let's complete this form. So going to the top line, let's extend that to the left vanishing point. So using your triangle, just draw a line from the top of the form that we marked, that was 3 inches up, and extend it to the left vanishing point. So draw it and then stop once you get to the left line here. That's going to create the boundary line for the top of the left side of the drawing. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And so we have the bottom line and we have the top line. These are just lightly drawn in, and we'll make them darker in just a minute or two. All right, so we have the left side. Now we're going to do the right side. So extend that drawing. I'm going to have to kind of cheat a little bit here because my triangle's not quite long enough. I'm going to extend it with my scale, and that'll get me there. And so I draw it from the center, and then I stop it right or about the edge of the right-hand vertical line. Same thing on the top line. Use that to line up and draw it and stop. So I'm going to go clean these up just a little bit. And what we have now is the general form of the object, or this structure that we're drawing. And we have a leading edge, we have a right side edge, and we have a left side edge. Now hopefully you observed that after we drew the center line, everything, at least that's facing our view here on the right side, is projecting to the right vanishing point. And on the left side, the left vanishing point. Remember, this is the side that's facing the viewer. So with that, we want to then extend a line up to create a roof line on this object. So to do that, we're going to extend a line up, and this is going to go off your sheet just a little bit. So don't panic, it's just a marker, it's not the finished drawing. So as I extend up, I'm right up here at the top. Okay, so I'm off my mark just a little bit here, but we're still going to put a little mark up there, and we're going to extend that line up lightly. And that's going to create a framework for putting the roof in. You'll see how this works in just a minute. So go ahead and extend your line, your left line up some distance. You're going to have to eyeball this a little bit because there's going to be that same projected intersection point that happens in just a minute. All right, so we're going to do the same thing on the right, extending the line up. Okay, now what that has done for us is that's given us a what I'll call a frame, or a set of boundary lines where we can put the roof in. So I'm going to stop for just a minute, and so you can and draw in our lines here just a little darker so you can see what the form is and what the blockout looks like for the roof. Now I'm doing this pretty quick, so I'm not so terribly worried about the graphics that I'm applying to this. They are accurate, but they're not altogether super precise. So now you can see the general form. Beforehand I drew it kind of light, and now we're going to extend up to the roof. Now I want to also identify that while we're seeing the front of this building or this structure, the backside's kind of important too. So I'm going to depart for a moment, and we're going to look at that. We have some things that are going to happen across the top, but we need the backside defined of this object so that we can see how that works. And so as we look at the drawing, as we look at this object, what we're starting to see is a formation that looks a little bit like this. And so as we look at it from, our little arrow point of view here, what's happening is that the angle that's being projected is not exactly a 45 degree. There's more of a presented side on one side to the view camera than there is in the other, and that's going to create some distortion. And so as a result, we're going to see one side, this side, as being larger than this side. And we're going to see, if you look at the angles here that are produced, they're also a little bit different. They're not uniform at all. They're projecting to the vanishing point, and that's going to make these different angles at this point. So let's talk about the backside of this object. As we saw with our demonstration here, or our little model here, we have a side that's projected more obliquely to the camera view. But what's important to see is there's a backside here, and it impacts how the form takes place as a three-dimensional element. And so we're going to locate that, and you're going to see that we're going to change some of the rules we talked about before. I mentioned in the previous video that when we are facing the view, or the viewer, or the camera, the sides will go towards the right side. Lines will go to the right vanishing point, and the left side lines will go to the left. But as we change this around now, the back side behaves opposite. So it's going to get a little tricky, but hopefully you'll see it as we demonstrate it. Just so that you know, when we are working with surfaces that face opposite of the view angle, then we're going to end up projecting to the opposite vanishing point. So let's start by identifying where that occurs. Again, using a little bit of a cheat with my scale, I'm going to go ahead and line up my back left corner, or my left far corner, which is right here, all the way through the structure to the right vanishing point. Okay, so the lower corner, line up your triangle and your other, if you're using a T-square, you can just line up the T-square that way, and so you have one continuous edge. And we want to extend that to the right vanishing point. So you can see this line goes all the way and stops right here. And as I line that up to just make sure that it's correct, okay, I'm going to extend a line lightly all the way through the structure. I'm going to do the same thing up above. Okay, so I got approximately the way I need to do it. I'm going to run that line in a similar way, and once I get to the right side line, I'm just going to stop. Remember, these are light lines, and we're going to erase some of them in just a bit. All right, so our right lines go to the opposite vanishing point because we're going to represent the back side of this object. And now we're going to do the same thing with the right side drawings. They're going to go to the left vanishing point. So I'm going to kind of line it up there, and that gets me pretty darn close. And I'm going to extend that line from the corner all the way through and stop it right there. Same thing on the lower portion of the right side. We're going to project it through. Let's see, make sure we're pretty close there. Yeah, I think we're good. Okay, so take that line from the lower left and project from the lower right and project it all the way to just beyond the left-hand vertical of the object. So what I want you to observe now is that we have lines that are kind of intersecting in the back. One set of lines is going on the right side, going to the left, and from the left side going to the right. Now, that's on the back side, as I mentioned. So to find the the back corner, we have the front corner, we have the left corner, and we have the right corner. To find the rear corner, we're going to look at where these two lines that have been projected, where they intersect. It may not be exactly perfect, but it should be pretty close. So as I do that, I'm right about here. So I averaged it a little bit. These since it's on the back side, we're not going to notice it too much, but it gives us a fourth corner. Again, a vertical, stays vertical, and it simply is where these two lines intersect. Now I'm going to dash them in so you can see them a little better and you can know where that piece is. That becomes important because we can't finish the roof until we know where all four corners of the building are. So I'm going to draw that in with a dash line, kind of a phantom line. Okay, do the same thing down below. And so what we're doing is we're just following the previous light lines until they get to that intersection point, and then we're marking it with a new vertical at our back corner. So we'll do all four in that same way. We'll just kind of draw in our dashes here so we can see. And hopefully at the end of this process, we can see all four sides in perspective. So we have a basic cube here now. We have a corner, we have the four corners, 1, 2, 3, and the back one here. And we have four sides, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is our basic cube form. Everything will be built based on this. So as a result, we going back to our roof, we have we've marked our top points here. This is the most important one to measure. And we've extended this line up as just a line that goes up, and where they intersect you'll see in just a minute. We've got the right line doing the same thing, and we kind of have to do that at the back. But remember, light lines, because we're going to be erasing them. Okay, so now that we have found these four corners, we can do a kind of a box in of the area, and some of it will be kind of in this portion of the video, which may disappear on you, but I think it'll be okay as we continue on. So taking the vertical line up here, we're going to go all the way to the left vanishing point because, again, this is facing us. So we're going to follow through with our rules here. And that line goes through there. Okay. Same thing on the right side, although I'm probably going to need to use my scale extension here. And that should be adequate. And I'm going to bring it down and stop it at the outside line here. Now, what you'll notice is that there's probably some tails here. You can go ahead and erase those because they're not going to help us any further. We have the same thing happening with the back line, but remember, those lines tend to be opposite. So using the new corner that we found up here from the vertical edge and the projected top line, we're going to extend that line to the opposite vanishing point because it's on the back side. So we're going to do that light, very light. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're going to come to the point right here where the projected line started. That's going to create a corner, that top corner. And we're going to do the same thing. Remember, these are light lines. So as we do that, I'm going to use my scale alignment, and there we go. Some of these lines get a little bit goofy, and I'm going to say that for this exercise, don't get too worried about it. Now, as I aligned them, there's a little bit of distortion and deviation, but don't get too worried about it. We went from this corner through to the left side. We went from the left side back across the center to the right vanishing point. All right, so again, backside goes to the opposite vanishing points. Where they meet is approximately where our back line extended up. So that's going to be our back corner. And if you look at that, you'll see, wow, is that distorted? It really is, because that's what happens optically at this location and this viewpoint. But we're going to continue on. So we've created our base block here. We have our roof framework in place, but now the roof needs to go in. And how do we find that? So we need to find the center line of the roof because it's symmetric, just like in our model. So, excuse me. So what that means is that in order to find the center line, we're going to use a crisscross method. That means we're going to go from corner to corner and top corner to top corner. And that's going to give us a center line. So we're going to start with the very top, going way up here to the top and extending down to the corner. And we're going to do this light. Remember, we're not making these lines very heavy. So we've got a dimension or a extension line that's going from this corner. Now we're going to draw the second one to this corner up here. This helps us find the center, and we're going to be repeating this process at multiple times because it's a way of finding a proportional center of the object. So I draw my line through there. And what that does is that identifies where one line intersects the other is going to give us a center line. Now, if you really look at them, the center line is not going to be in the measured middle, but it's going to be in the proportional middle based on perspective. And that's going to be a pattern that we see repeated continually. It's not going to fall at a measured center. It's going to fall at a proportional center. So with that in mind, we're going to project a vertical line up to the point where it intersects the top line. And it's going to fall offside my video here a little bit, but I think you know where we're going with this and you can follow along. So I bring that line up, and that's going to be the top of the roof of this structure. So we're just a little bit above into the video. I apologize about that, but I think you can still follow along. We're going to do the same thing along the back side because this roof goes from front to back. So again, from the front corner to the back corner, draw a line. From the front right corner to the back corner, we're going to draw a light, almost a phantom line. And we're going to do the same thing at the front extended corner, and we're going to take it back. Now I'm going to show you a couple other things that are noteworthy here in just a minute. But let's get that line in. Okay, so as these two lines intersect, we find a point right here in the middle. And we can go ahead and from that intersection point, extend that line up. And as we extend that line up to the very top of that cube, we can see that our roof line now is going to go from the ridge of the roof is going to go from this point right here that we found just a couple minutes ago to the new one we just drew. So we're going to draw a line and connect those two together. You can make this line a little bit more pronounced because it's going to be a finished line of the drawing. So now we have the ridge. Now it's just a matter of connecting the corners of the roof slope to the adjacent vertical walls. So starting at the front center, we're going to take the top of the wall and project our line back to the top of the roof. Okay, you can make that line a little bit heavier also. And then we're going to do the same thing with this corner. We're going to extend the line from the ridge back up here to the corner or the top of the wall. So this will complete the front form of the roof. And then the back form, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go back from the top of the wall to where we marked the roof line, the ridge line at the rear of the structure. Okay. And if we wanted to complete this, we would draw a light line from the back wall up, but it's not going to be terribly important. We've found really the observable piece that is important to the drawing. Okay, so what you'll see here is we have our base, we've drawn that. Now we have a roof line on this side, and we have a gable end here. This is a sloped section. This is an open gable. It's just a triangle section. So if I was to represent what that looked like, we would have the same situation that we were talking about previously in terms of our orientation. And we would have a roof line that goes like this. So it's not perfect, but it should be okay. All right. So if you look at your drawing and you look at our camera view here, you're going to see one side has a lower diminished exposure and has an open gable side. The other side has the slope and has the more I'll say expanded view to the camera or to the view. To the viewer. So that's our relationship that's occurring here, is that as we're drawing it, we're seeing this perspective occur in the object that we're working on. So I'm going to set this back aside again. All right. So I'm going to harden up these lines here a bit, and then we're going to continue on with this portion of the drawing. At this point, you may choose and want to remove some of these guidelines that were drawn lightly before, because they can be confusing as you continue to draw. Okay. So the things that we want to do here now are to think about the idea of, here's our basic form. Unfortunately, our top is missing here because of the way the video is put together, but I think if you have the projected lines, you should be okay. I'm going to take just a minute and get rid of some of these extraneous light lines because I want to see the drawing a little bit more clearly. You can go ahead and get rid of all the guidelines that you've put in and the crisscross lines that helped you find these various center points. A little bit more up here. Go ahead and get rid of that. That's not helpful. I'll get rid of that. Okay, now I mentioned just a minute or so ago some interesting aspects of this proportional midpoint or proportional ways of understanding the drawing. Here's where a little bit of artistry comes in. We're not necessarily applying in this very rough and simplified approach. We are not using the formal approach of perspective building. That's represented in the book, and if you'd like to do that, you're welcome to experiment with that. Hopefully, in later parts of our video demonstration and moving on to part 2 of our assignment, you'll see that it is much more formal, and the setup process takes a lot of time to get that to work. I used to teach that portion of this assignment. We used to build these drawings by using the more formal grid and coordinate method, and it was very effective. It just took a lot of time. The setup the setup alone took about 2 hours to 2.5 hours of lab time just to kind of get to where we're at right now. So in this example, what I'm really trying to do is show you the trends and how the rules apply in this very general approach. We're going to rely on another method that will be discussed later in the video about how to get very precise and how to get it in a more efficient way. But we're going to stick with this information for right now. So back to that topic of proportions, we're going to rely on the idea that the proportions for this drawing will be pretty easy to find. We're going to be using halves, maybe quarters, and so that would be halves of halves. So let's look at something for just a minute. When we found the middle of this ridge by doing a crisscross from those larger sides, I want to point out that you can do a similar crisscross method for any portion on the side of the drawing you're working on and pretty much get where you need to go. So if I draw a crisscross from this corner to this corner and this corner to this corner, it's going to happen at the same point. It's going to deliver the same midpoint that we saw when we did the whole roof. So I'm going to just do a quick little demonstration of that so you can see. I'm just going to draw a light line because I'm going to erase it in just a minute. Now, I have crisscrossed from these two corners, here to here and here to here, instead of the bigger roof area that we did previously. What I want you to observe is when I line up my crisscross, it's exactly the same location as it was before. These are some rules of geometry that I'm not going to get into right now, but for those of you who recall some of your earlier geometry, you'll find that the proportions of one adjacent geometric form often match the same of another adjacent as long as the planes are the same. So as a result, I can measure just this box and find the middle of a larger plane. Now we're going to do something similar over here. But before we do that, I want to create a base. I want to create like a foundation line of this object. So as we saw in the section drawings, the building floor doesn't sit on the ground. It sits up off the ground. And that's pretty true even at your own home. What that means is that our illustrations have to take that into consideration also. So for this exercise, what I want to do is I want you to find the lift a bottom line off the cube of 1 inch. So we're going to measure from this portion this area right here on the plan all the way up to this area right here. So basically we're going to measure up from the bottom. And so I've measured that up, and we're going to, from our very lowest corner, we're going to extend that up to the left vanishing point. We're going to do the same thing on the right side. And I'm going to have to use my scale again here. And that gets me right there. And I extend my line over. And so now I have lifted up a 1 inch line from the front corner and extended it back, projecting it to the right vanishing point and to the left vanishing point. And you'll notice that that will be I'll call it our floor line, our finished floor line for the object. Now, it might not be a bad idea to follow suit with what we did on the back side because it'll have bearing on the on where this floor goes at the back of the structure as well. And we're not really figuring in too much in the way of wall thicknesses here. These are just lines of delineation so we know where things are. So we've got the left-hand side and we have the right-hand side. So I'm going to start on the right-hand side here, and I'm going to project, remember, to the opposite side because we're on the back side of the structure. So having done that, extend our line over, again from the new floor line to the vanishing point. And there we go. So, and I'm going to keep it light, but it's going to extend back to the back corner of the structure. And we're going to do the same thing on the left side. So using the left marker, which is 1 inch up, or the 1 inch floor line here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to project to the right vanishing point, and it's going to go and stop at the back wall. So what's really happening now is that we see how this structure has a floor that's lifted up from the ground level. And so we can use this now as we build other portions of the floor. So it's okay to think about this object as being part 1 completed, and we can look at we can compare it to what we have in our example, and we can see the parts. We can draw in those that need a little bit more emphasis, but you can see the proportionality. It works pretty well, and I think we're ready to move on to the next piece.